There is a category of military capability that exists not to be used, but to be known. Its value is entirely in the deterrent it creates, in the calculation an adversary makes when it looks at a target and concludes that the cost of attacking it exceeds anything the attack could achieve. Iran built that category of capability along the Strait of Hormuz coastline over the course of decades, and it built it with a specific adversary in mind. The anti-ship missile launchers concealed inside reinforced mountain tunnels, the Ghadir systems, the Kosar with its 300-kilometer range, the Abu Musa cruise missile capable of striking targets more than 600 miles from its launch point. These were not weapons positioned for conventional use against a comparable adversary. They were positioned for one purpose: to make the Strait of Hormuz unclosable by military force without a cost that Washington would decide no administration could pay. Iran looked at those tunnels, at the depth and reinforcement of the concrete and granite surrounding them, at the mobile launchers that could roll to the surface, fire, and disappear before any response aircraft could arrive, and concluded that it had found leverage that could not be answered from the air. That conclusion is now a crater. What the United States executed along the Hormuz coastline with the GBU-72 advanced penetrator munition is not a story about one weapon destroying one target. It is a story about the end of a deterrence architecture, and what happens to the strategic posture of a government whose primary leverage instrument has just been physically sealed inside the mountains it was built to hide in. Subscribe to From Report right now and turn on notifications, because understanding what the GBU-72 actually did, how it was engineered to do it, and what remains unresolved in the operational picture that follows, is the analysis that explains why the next phase of this conflict will be determined by decisions made in Tehran, Washington, and Riyadh in the coming days. To understand why the GBU-72 strikes carry the strategic weight they carry, you need to understand what Iran's underground missile network actually was, not as a surface-level description of weapons in tunnels, but as a deliberate architectural response to 30 years of studying American air power. Iran's military planners are not improvising. They have spent 3 decades watching how the United States locates, targets, and eliminates surface threats in conventional conflicts. They watched the Gulf War. They watched the precision strike campaigns in Afghanistan. They watched Libya. Every one of those conflicts taught the same lesson, and Iranian doctrine absorbed it systematically. Any asset visible from the sky is an asset already lost. The response was to go underground, not as an improvised measure, but as the foundational principle of coastal defense architecture. The anti-ship missile systems along the Hormuz coastline were driven into tunnels bored directly into mountain faces. Camouflaged entrances concealed their locations from satellite reconnaissance. Reinforced bunker construction was engineered to absorb and deflect the most advanced precision munitions in American inventories. Mobile truck-mounted launchers added a further layer of survivability. A system that can roll out, fire, and return underground before the first response aircraft reaches the target area is a system that conventional strike packages cannot reliably eliminate. Iran's entire deterrence model rested on the depth of those tunnels and the reinforcement of the concrete protecting them. It rested on the institutional calculation that whatever the United States could drop from the air, Iranian engineers had built deeper than the largest conventional bunker buster could reach. That calculation was not irrational, given the limitations of the weapons that were available. It was made against the wrong weapons. The GBU-72 was designed specifically to make that calculation obsolete. To understand what this weapon is and why it matters, the comparison to its predecessor is the clearest path. The GBU-28 bunker buster first entered service during the Gulf War, a weapon that in its time represented the furthest limit of American penetrating munition technology. It was capable of punching through approximately 15 feet of reinforced concrete and roughly 150 feet of compacted earth. For the adversaries of the early 1990s, that capability was decisive. For adversaries who had spent the 3 decades since 1991 building specifically to outlast it, the GBU-28 had become a known quantity, a weapon whose limitations could be designed around if you understood what those limitations were. Iran understood what those limitations were. The GBU-72 was built to eliminate that understanding as a viable strategic foundation. Its warhead combines AFX-757 and PBXN-109 explosive compounds, the same proven formula embedded in America's 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrator, the largest bunker-busting device ever constructed. Its JDAM-based precision guidance system pairs GPS positioning with inertial navigation, allowing delivery aircraft to release the weapon from standoff distances outside the effective envelope of surviving Iranian air defense systems. Exactly how much further the GBU-72 penetrates compared to the GBU-28 remains classified. That detail is not an administrative omission. It is a deliberate signal, a message to every government operating underground facilities that the margin they believed they had calculated into their construction specifications may not be the margin that actually exists between their facility and what a GBU-72 can reach. But the most operationally significant characteristic of what the GBU-72 accomplished along the Hormuz coastline is not about penetration depth. It is about a principle of underground facility neutralization that the public coverage of these strikes has almost entirely missed. You do not need to destroy what is inside a tunnel to render it permanently non-functional. You need to destroy the tunnel's ability to function as a tunnel. Every underground missile facility, regardless of how deep it reaches, regardless of how reinforced the internal chambers are, requires surface access to operate. Access corridors through which personnel move, maintenance equipment operates, fuel is delivered, and, in Iran's specific coastal missile architecture, through which mobile launchers roll to the surface to reach their firing positions. Collapse those corridors, seal those access points, destroy the surface infrastructure that connects the underground chambers to the operational environment above them. Whatever is stored inside becomes permanently irrelevant. The launcher cannot fire if it can never reach the surface. The carefully constructed fortress becomes a sealed vault. The deep tunnel becomes a tomb for the weapons it was designed to protect. This is the precise logic the United States applied along the Hormuz coastline. The GBU-72's combination of penetrating power and precision guidance is exceptionally engineered for exactly that application, reaching the access infrastructure that lies deep enough to be protected from conventional munitions, but not deep enough to be protected from what the GBU-72 can reach. The scale of the Hormuz strike operation requires specific examination because the aircraft capable of delivering this volume of GBU-72 munitions is not a general-purpose strike platform. An F-15E Strike Eagle, one of the primary tactical aircraft in the American inventory, can carry a maximum of 1 GBU-72 per sortie. Credible estimates place the number of GBU-72 munitions deployed across the Hormuz strike package at close to 50. 50 F-15E sorties carrying 1 bomb each would constitute a visible force concentration that intelligence monitoring would register well in advance, and that would require a forward operating base significantly closer to the target area than the British Isles. The arithmetic resolves toward a different platform. The B-1B Lancer strategic bomber, currently forward deployed at RAF Fairford in the United Kingdom, can carry up to 12 GBU-72 munitions per aircraft. 4 B-1B Lancers carrying 12 weapons each produce 48 munitions, a figure consistent with the estimated strike package launched from a base more than 8,000 kilometers from the target, flying over Iranian airspace that had already been stripped of approximately 85% of its integrated air defense capacity through the combined effects of Operation Epic Fury and Israel's parallel operations. That is not simply a military strike. That is a demonstration of reach, a message that the distance between a hardened Iranian underground facility and an American bomber base on the western edge of Europe has become operationally irrelevant. No underground facility along the Hormuz coastline is beyond the range of a platform that can carry 12 GBU-72 munitions from the United Kingdom. The strategic context within which this capability was demonstrated is the component that extends its significance beyond the immediate operational outcome. Before these strikes, more than 100 vessels per day were transiting the Strait of Hormuz in normal conditions. By the time the GBU-72 missions were executed, that figure had collapsed to 3 or 4 ships per day. The economic consequences of that collapse were visible in crude prices above $100 per barrel, in shipping insurance rates that effectively priced commercial transit out of reach, in the disruption to liquefied natural gas flows from Qatar that European and Asian markets depend on, and in the downstream energy price increases that reached household budgets across every import-dependent economy on Earth. Iran's calculation was that the economic pain of the closure would generate diplomatic and political pressure that would force Washington toward negotiation before American military capabilities could neutralize the leverage the closure provided. The GBU-72 strikes represent the American military's answer to that calculation. The message embedded in 50 bunker-penetrating munitions delivered against coastal missile infrastructure that Iran believed was immune to air attack is the same message that the original deterrence architecture was designed to prevent being sent. The leverage instrument is gone, the mountains are sealed, and the economic cost of keeping them sealed is orders of magnitude lower than the economic cost of the closure they were designed to defend. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper was explicit in the language he used after the strikes. American forces remain focused on eliminating every element of Iran's threat to free navigation, and operations will not stop until those threats are permanently removed. That language, permanently removed, is the operational vocabulary of a military command that is not describing a tactical adjustment. It is describing an objective. Reports indicate that American intelligence assets were actively building target pictures of additional missile sites and hardened facilities along the Hormuz coast that survived the initial GBU-72 strikes, and that coalition partners were moving toward formal commitments on joint patrol operations in the strait. Iran's public response carried the characteristic dual register of a government managing both an external audience and a domestic one simultaneously. Public statements threatened retaliatory strikes against Gulf energy infrastructure, naming Saudi Arabia and the UAE explicitly, a signal that any further American escalation would spread consequences across the region. Simultaneously, Tehran announced that it would permit most commercial vessels to transit the strait, a departure from the near-total blockade posture it had maintained. Whether that represents genuine de-escalation or tactical repositioning ahead of a recalibrated strategy is a question that shipping data in the days following the strikes will answer more honestly than any official statement from either government. The observation that the GBU-72 strikes may represent this weapon's first operational deployment in live combat carries implications that extend well beyond the Hormuz corridor. Defense analysts who have tracked the weapon's development agree on the significance of the Iran deployment as a demonstration of operational capability in a contested environment against the specific category of target the weapon was designed to defeat. Every government operating hardened underground facilities, and that category includes Iran's nuclear infrastructure, North Korean missile programs, and a range of Chinese military installations, has now received a live operational data point about a weapon that did not previously exist in the American arsenal with confirmed combat use. Iran itself received a version of that data point earlier through its proxy forces. Reports indicate that the GBU-72 was potentially deployed against Houthi underground positions in Yemen during that campaign, and if accurate, Iran was observing the weapon's performance against facilities that Houthi forces had constructed using Iranian-derived engineering doctrine. The conclusion Iran drew from that observation, that its Hormuz coastal facilities were built to a standard this weapon could not defeat, has now been tested against the weapon itself. The conclusion was wrong. Here is where the operational picture stands. Iran's underground coastal missile network along the Strait of Hormuz, constructed over decades at significant cost and built specifically around the belief that American air-delivered munitions could not reach its critical depth, has been struck by GBU-72 munitions that sealed its access infrastructure. B-1B Lancers operating from RAF Fairford delivered approximately 50 munitions across the strike package. Transit through the strait has partially resumed. CENTCOM has stated operations will continue until threats to free navigation are permanently removed. Intelligence targeting of surviving facilities is active. Iran's public response threatens regional energy infrastructure while privately permitting commercial transit. And Israel, watching every detail of the GBU-72's demonstrated performance against hardened underground facilities, is drawing conclusions that extend to the question of Iranian nuclear infrastructure in ways that this conflict's architects may not have fully anticipated when its first objectives were defined. Subscribe to From Report and turn on notifications. When the intelligence target picture of surviving Hormuz coastal facilities produces a second strike package, the analysis will be here. When Iran's response to the proven vulnerability of its underground deterrence architecture takes a form visible enough to constitute a strategic pivot, the analysis will be here. When the GBU-72 demonstration produces formal procurement and doctrine reassessments in allied and adversary capitals that the defense industry record makes visible, the analysis will be here. Evidence first, analysis second. What it means for you, always.